right. Welcome. We are joined today by Mr. Tom Hannum, the legend himself, joining us from Massachusetts. Tom is the associate band director at UMass, has been with them for 30 plus years now. Is that right? 40.
40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
4 decades strong with UMass.
They say life begins at 40, so I figured I'd give it a shot.
College band begins at 40 years.
No kidding.
And so Tom was with the Cadets back in the 80s, and then Star of Indiana, and then Blast, and then some other places, and now Carolina Crown. And so just an awesome career as a percussion designer, arranger, instructor, and just experienced instructor in the drum corps world. And so we're looking forward to digging into some of those topics and hearing what you've got to say. So if you could maybe just tell us what your current gigs are, like what your role is at UMass, what you do with Crown in the summer.
Sure. I have to say, I think it's worth noting because I was just on a call just this past week, so it's fresh in my mind, and that is I marched in for 4 years and then was really fortunate enough to immediately be asked to write and teach for the Crossmen, which especially in the Maryland area and whatnot, the Crossmen are, pretty close by, especially, well, they used to be pretty close by. And but I grew up, just outside of Philadelphia. And so that's really where I got my start, at least of any corps that people listening here might remember. There were drum corps before that I was involved with that were, more regionalized and ones that people wouldn't probably know of. But I think the Crossmen are worth noting. I marched there for 4 years, and then I taught there right out of aging out for my first 4 years before going to Garfield. And maybe depending on where we go with our stories here, I wound up after Brass Theater with Star of Indiana, we went back to the Crossmen for round 2 in 1997 and 98. And
that's right.
Colin McNutt was there with me, and Jim Ancona, and we came back to there, and Michael Klesch joined us for the horns, brass, and so a couple stints at the Crossmen worth noting, and proud of my tradition and heritage there. So at any rate, I just thought that was worth mentioning. So
awesome.
So your question was
what are the current gigs?
Okay.
What are you currently doing at UMass and with Crown, notwithstanding current situations?
Sure. Right. It's probably, I'll start with UMass because, as I mentioned, 40 years, and a long time. I mean, and in a lot of ways, I was very lucky because I was asked to come up here to be a graduate teaching assistant, and when that was done, they created a position for me as an assistant band director, and I managed to stay around long enough to watch many things develop and evolve and be part of some really rewarding experiences. George Parks, which some of the kids there might know of him through his drum major exploits, and maybe they've attended his camps or whatever. But he was the guy that got me up here, and I worked with him for 30 years. It was fabulous, and so a lot there. And I guess over time, my role kind of got to be the associate band director, and the integration of what I did with the percussion studio area and whatnot sort of evolved and grew and took on some different, shapes and sizes as things developed. And so that was really great. And I think starting this year, actually brand new, as I've kind of scaled back my involvement, and it's more of a part-time kind of a thing. And it's nice because I can still stay connected and hopefully help the band really get, through some of these kind of situations that we're experiencing now, and hopefully have things kind of set up for the future, as it would be probably time for me to be thinking about some other
Sure.
things to
Yeah.
do. But I'm not ready yet. So part-time,
Yeah.
I think, is my role there.
Cool.
Still involved with the band, and I guess the other piece of that, I mean, obviously a great deal of my focus is with the percussion area, but you asked about Carolina Crown, and so I've been there for 8 years, I believe, which is the longest I've been with any drum corps, teaching wise. And so, I'm the percussion director there, and kind of oversee the whole thing. And there's many great people that are involved there on the staff, and some of whom I guess, they kind of handle like more of the daily nuts and bolts part of it than I do. But as a team, I think we function very well. But my job is to, I guess, direct the whole thing, and kind of make sure that the arrangements, the music is happening to our liking as an organization, and what we're looking for in terms of just, I guess, how it works with the brass and the visual and all of that. But so
cool.
that is my job there. So
that's great.
But it's very collaborative though.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you guys have had such incredible people at your side at Crown, both your counterparts in the other sections and some of the staff that you have seem to be fully capable of being in a director role somewhere else, but they all just seem to come together and want to work on that product, which is why they are what they are, I think.
And they are directors. Jim Ancona is the associate director or assistant director at University of Delaware, and he operates that program, oversees what's going on. Travis Peterman is the director for the GMU percussion ensemble, the indoor group there, and some of the other guys have their own projects that they're working on. So there really is a lot of tremendous experience, and we've had continuity. The people have stuck together, which means an awful lot, because I think when you watch most successful groups, that is part of the fabric of their story, is they have people that stick together, and there is a continuity and an expectation rather than this constant change and upheaval and whatnot. I think you see it in sports teams. Mm-hmm. They're able to keep the coaching staffs intact. You might have some ups and downs, but by and large, those with the consistency seem to win out most of the time. So
that's cool.
A lot of great people there. So.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up the Crossmen thing. I hadn't really thought about that, but I know that's a huge part of your history and so much of drum corps history. And I think people now, myself included, forget because they've been in Texas for a while, and they kind of have their own identity, and they do a lot of really cool creative stuff, but it's not the same as when they were right here, at one point under the umbrella of the Cadets, and before that, just, another corps in our region. So what was the atmosphere like at Crossmen when you marched, and who were some of the people you marched with? Because I know that there was like this huge draw of talent that ended up going on and doing things, like in the snare line that you were in, I think, in particular, some of those guys that have gone on to do so many other things. What was it about that organization, and what was your experience like there that's made it such a big part of your history and drum corps history?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were very lucky. When the Crossmen formed, they were the result of the merger of two drum corps, Keystone Regiment and the 507 Hornets. And we really did have some pretty good drumming talent that came as part of that corps at the outset. Our director, Robbie Robinson, who actually just got inducted into the DCI Hall of Fame, he himself was a drummer. And so, there's kind of like, from looking over, he probably wanted for things to be done well in the drumming percussion area. So we were lucky. We had really good instructors. Eric Landis and Billy Kaufman were our teachers, and we just, I think we had a lot of people who were at the right place at the right time, because again, we stuck with it. Like we came in there in 1975 and we played for 4 years together, and that's a large majority of that group was that way. And people that were, who would you know of people that were in the group would be George Hopkins was in the snare line. And I mean, obviously he went on to great things at the Cadets, and Chris Thompson was in the tenor line, and he went on to teach both the Crossmen and with me. And then after I left and he was still there, then he went out to the Madison Scouts, and they won a championship there under, Chris's guidance. And Dale Dare was in the snare line, and this guy Ed McCauley was the best player we had, I thought. And Ed was never in a drum corps. Kind of came out of nowhere. He went to Princeton, happened to join us at the same time, 1975. And he stayed for 5 years, and really bright guy and just wonderful player. And a lot of people in there. Eddie Boyer worked at Yamaha for years and rose to really high level in there. And unfortunately we lost him this summer, but or this spring. And I'm sorry if I'm missing other people, but there's a lot of good talent in there, and honestly that carried through even after we aged out. I stayed on, as I said, with myself and Chris and Dale and a bunch of people, and I mean there's a who's who in there during the time that I was teaching those 4 years. Robbie Robinson won 3 individual snare drum championships. He's an incredible player. Mark Thurston was in there. I mean, while Robbie was winning, Mark was like right there, neck and neck with him, man. And Mark, I mean, as many people know, or perhaps some of the younger people don't know, he's really the godfather of WGI percussion.
Yeah,
has been in charge of it from the outset, remains in charge of it, and has steered that thing into being just a wildly successful organization. And Bob Morrison was he played timpani in there, and he's gone on to just amazing things. He's probably the single biggest music advocate that we have in this country. And that is, I mean, he is amazingly influential with what he's done over the many years. So there's just a lot of, Jimmy Dwyer was in that snare line. He's very, very successful WGI judge. And on it goes. There's just a lot of wonderful talent. So
cool.
Yeah.
We have a couple student questions.
Yeah.
Naaman, one of our drum majors, wants to know what percussionists or non-percussionists served as role models for you and helped you get where you are today.
Well, I would say my teachers, Joe Morella was my first drum instructor, and Joe is also in the DCI Hall of Fame. And I was a little guy when I started. I'm talking 9 years old, and he would pick me up at my house and take me over to practice. And so without those kind of people, and you look up to them, you're inspired by them. I think another guy who really has had a lot of influence on me was Eric Landis, and he taught us at the Keystone Regiment and then stayed with us at the Crossmen. And Eric was he's a very talented guy. His disposition was wonderful, very funny, and he was real open about helping us learn and understand. We would go over his house and sit there and talk for hours on end, and we would do it pretty regularly. So he was patient with us because
Yeah.
we were very, very interested in lots of questions and lots of opinions and things of that. He was really, really great with us. And I would say that the one guy out there that I looked out and said, well, man, who would you like to be like? You know, I was hoping to be like Fred Sanford, you know, and Fred was not only in what he wrote, but then he got involved in the percussion industry at Slingerland and then Ludwig and then Yamaha. And he was the kind of guy who could bring people together, and he really made a vast difference in terms of how percussion got into the education system, like for schools where you're teaching, you know. But dare I say that the marimbas, you know, that are in your band room, probably not happening without Fred's influence and how he got band directors back in the late 70s and early 80s to see how marching band could help their overall program. And he was able to integrate things and bring people together again. So he was, I liked him, and he was an awful lot. And Fred was actually, in 1982, he was our consultant for the Crossmen the last year I was there. We were able to bring him in, and he spent considerable time with us. It was really an incredible experience to have him around us and to be able to pick his brain and just see how he operated. So those people had a lot to do with it. And so
awesome. Yeah. I wanted to ask your comment about the marimba thing got me thinking, because I was thinking, well, we might have like a marimba, like a little one, if not for that, but we wouldn't have 5, and not just to have 5, but to all the other stuff that we get to do with that. And one of the things that I think a lot of people may not know about is the marimba bands that you have at UMass. And so what are those ensembles like? When do they rehearse? And I think I've seen some really cool charts come out of there. In fact, you've lent us a couple at times. So what's that program like? Why is that important to you at UMass?
Well, it was sort of an outgrowth of Peter Tanner was the percussion instructor here when I arrived, and he had been here for a while. And one of his big things was the marimba ensemble. And so that was, you know, it's like all marimbas, maybe a xylophone, bells, upright bass, some percussion, little accessory instruments or whatever, but mostly marimbas, you know. So at some point, you know, we're kind of like, there's a little bit more that we can do with this than just that kind of instrumentation and that type of repertoire. So we sort of ventured with the help of the students, kind of going into the marimba bands, which incorporated a couple marimbas, a couple vibraphones, xylophone, bells, drum set, bass, a lot, you know, mostly electric bass, and then a percussion position. So we had a percussionist. So it started getting a little bit more towards elements of jazz and elements of pop and fusion and, you know, things of that sort, where actually kind of a Latin type of music, we were drawn to that for a while. And so it basically, I think, why is it important? It provides a different kind of music for the students to play. And in the way that we've approached it, the students also do a lot of the arranging of the charts. So they write it, they teach it, they play it.
That's awesome.
You know, it's a great experience, because a lot of times I think students might aspire to write, but maybe there's not an outlet to actually hear your music played. So for any of the students that are out there that are wanting to do any kind of writing, the first thing I would say is don't wait. You know, there's no reason to wait. Just get in there. And I think a lot of it happens through, you just improvise on your instrument, like whatever your instrument is. You improvise on it, and then maybe eventually you want to get to a place where you start to document some of that. And it can be paper and pencil, it can be computer, it can be a microphone where you're just recording it. It doesn't matter what your method is. And so don't don't feel compelled to have to follow some predetermined plan. Like whatever works for you is great. And eventually you'll get to the point where you start putting it on computer or paper or whatever, and you'll start making progress, and hopefully you'll get to a point where you can get it played by some of your friends or maybe one of the groups at school or whatever it might be. But I think that the idea of, because I remember just doing this, like playing along to, when I was growing up, there was records, of drum corps, right? Now it's videos, or, we've even sort of kind of went straight through the whole DVD thing. And we're into videos. So,
yeah.
But I would listen and try to like pick up and learn the parts, and by doing that, you're building your vocabulary. You're kind of learning how to improvise, because you're doing things that you're not quite sure about. So, and you don't have to be able to read music to do it. You really don't. If you can hear what you would like to do, then that's probably the most important thing. Because if you can hear it, then you can try to represent it, and then you go from there.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I know. Certainly, I've seen a lot of students with the advent of cloud-based arranging programs now. Kids are getting better and more savvy with that stuff than I am, because that's part of their generation. And there's programs that you can get for free or for $5 a month that do vastly more than Finale did 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, maybe. And so,
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to students to just dig in and try it.
Yeah. And, like, again, whatever your method is. And, one thing I would say is important is, to your point, Mike, there are a lot of software, notation, and various programs out there that can help you with this process of arranging. But it's really important to learn the sound of the instruments themselves, rather than some playback, file that you are, I guess, putting all your stock in.
Sure.
It's cool. It helps you, I think, with the form. It helps you certainly get to next places. You can experiment maybe with some different rhythms underneath and blah, blah, blah. You can do a lot with it. There's no doubt. But don't overlook the importance of learning what those instruments sound like to your ear, as opposed to what the playback delivers, because it's great that it's close enough, but it's very different. The human element's different, and how you play your instrument from the point of view of an arranger, of a composer, the more you know about how your instruments produce sound, probably the more informed you're going to be about what you can write. So
yeah,
don't always trust that playback.
Yeah, especially in percussion.
Can be very deceptive.
Yeah, all the VDL samples in the world never quite give you the full scope of the instruments, and it's good. They've done an incredible job, and but it's not the human thing, and that might be just a little hard for people to identify with, because it's easy to hit the play button and go, that sounds awesome, right? It's flawless. It sounds flawless, but you learn what things you write. Like, I think one of the ultimate goals of a person who's writing for, say, like your band or many of the other groups like that, I think one of their objectives should be, they should try to make you sound better, perhaps, than what the group is, because a good arranger can do that, and somebody who's learning and is maybe not, kind of learned all their tricks and their vocabulary, sometimes they can make a group not sound worse than what they are. Yeah.
Because they're kind of learning. It's trial and error, and that happens. But it's good to know that you really do have an impact on how proficient a group sounds as a writer. So
yeah. So to dig into the arranging thing a little more, what's your process like at Crown? Like for the total design of the show, what comes first? What is your role in that? And how do you approach like the type of repertoire that's coming out now and that you guys are putting to work there?
Yeah. Well, honestly, it has evolved over the years. I think, because we've had a few important design people kind of come and go, and then there's the replacements, and so it's like you're learning how to work together as a team, and what works for one team might not exactly be the same fit for another group of people. So my role has changed some. I think I've been lucky in that I'm very good friends personally with Michael Klesch, who is the brass arranger, and we've worked professionally together for a long time, all the way back to the Garfield Cadets in 1983. So and we've worked forever and ever at UMass writing music together, and the Crossmen and and Crown and Garfield. So there's a long history there. So I think Michael is, our compatibility level and our instinct for one another is really well developed, and so I think I'm lucky to be kind of in on a lot of the initial thought and conversation about what we should do and how we should do it. Now, the whole selection of music is pretty wide open for the design team to kind of contribute and offer their suggestions. I don't think any one of us, I don't think, none of us feel like we have all the answers. So there is a collaboration that goes on, and it starts by, sometimes we pick the music first and then kind of cultivate a concept, as we're going along. And then sometimes the reverse is true, where there's a concept and then we try to select the music that we think can support and promote the concept. So we've done it a few different ways, Mike, and I think it's every year is different, so there's never really a given plan that we always follow. And but we get on weekly calls to kind of talk through it, and sometimes we're able to make good headway, and sometimes there's like anything, when you're writing, sometimes it comes out easy, and sometimes you got to kind of feel your way through it. But so I think it starts at that sort of global level, and then it works its way into the musical arrangements. And so if Michael is doing something, I'm pretty much there with him right from the outset. And so that again part I think is fortunate. Sometimes, like we've kind of recently gotten into trying to start some of the percussion heavy areas with the sound design first. So we kind of lay a bed there with the sound design and let that sort of guide us through, I guess, being inspired by that. And we work. Andrew Montero is a guy who kind of does that, and Frank Sullivan, honestly, is he's involved in the very initial side of that area, particularly with generating initial ideas for us to consider. So, sometimes the brass starts with it, sometimes the percussion starts with it. It really just depends, and I think that has kind of kept things fresh for us. And like I said, a little bit of this newer process has been to, at times, have this sound design as a bed for us, especially in heavy percussion moments. So, so that's cool. And, you know, I mean, I worked very closely with Jim Ancona. I mentioned him before. Jim, he was a student at UMass, and we worked at, we wrote some stuff for the Crusaders, Boston Crusaders early on. Some work at Star of Indiana, you know, together, Brass Theater. And then we came back and did the Crossmen stuff together. When we got back involved in drum corps with the Madison Scouts for a couple of years, we wrote the book together there. So our instinct for one another's process and what we know the other person can or is likely to do is pretty developed over a long period of time. So there's another level of comfort there. And I will say, I mean, Crown's music ensemble it's killer. I mean, it's killer. I mean, because the stuff works together, you know. Now, whatever, we could develop our palette into other treatments or whatnot, but the treatments that we have settled on and have done, they're working in tandem with each other. Battery to pit, pit to battery, percussion to brass, brass to sound design and all that. It's pretty well figured out. So we're lucky. We're lucky that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think Crown has been not only pushing the limits with design, but probably first and foremost with how an entire ensemble can sound, from the brass to the percussion. And man, when that all clicks and you get to sit and just listen to that, I'm sure it's awesome being a designer and seeing that come to life, but it's great as a fan too, just listening.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's interesting, I think, particularly in this day and age, there has been a lot of emphasis placed on miking instruments, boosting the sound of the front ensemble, and wind instruments, whether it's soloists or small groups or actually even full brass sounds, and the sound design itself, you know, in terms of it's an additional voice in the orchestration. So we've been working really pretty hard at how we, I guess, conceptualize the sound of the group. And for us, it's a hopefully a blend and a mixture of trying to support the acoustic sounds and not losing them. I guess maybe that's an easy way to say it.
Yeah.
Not losing them in the mix for the sake of volume increase. You know, so whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, who knows?
Sure.
I think the musicians out there, you know, people like yourself, band directors, and I think they appreciate it because, you know, they're hearing a range inside of the sound of the ensemble. So
yeah, I think so. That's great. We have a student question. When it comes to designing and arranging shows from Carolina Crown to Blast and all the other stuff you've done, how do you keep your ideas fresh and creative, having been involved for so long?
Yeah. Well, I think at the outset, you know, if I can go back to the beginning of writing, I tried to copy drum lines, right? The great drum lines that were out there. And I think, you know, that's a place you start, so that you can develop your voice. And then very quickly, I got into trying to copy the artists. You know, at the Crossmen, for instance, we played some Louis Bellson charts, played Buddy Rich charts. And so I was trying to lift from their original recordings what those people were doing. And it was a challenge, but it was a wood that I learned a lot, an awful lot. And then we took what I transcribed and tried to learn how to orchestrate it within the percussion instruments. And then going up to like Garfield, we played a lot of Bernstein and a lot of Copland. So now we're into orchestral scores. We're out of the jazz medium and with the orchestral scores. But particularly Bernstein was very percussive. So you could get his original score and you could draw a lot of inspiration and literally some parts from his music. And Copeland did some great stuff too in that regard. So following the original masters, I mean, like, these guys they're the best. So seems like it's not a bad thing to try to emulate what they're trying to do. You know, and then I think, just at UMass, we played all kinds of music, you know, so that was important. Yeah, I think people can maybe lose sight of that, but, you know, it's a college band, but the percussion was growing and growing and growing and growing. I mean, dare I say, I think that program in the first 20 years, I don't know that it ever did improve 1 year to the next, you know. And eventually you get to a point where there are some various plateaus that you hit and cycles start to happen and whatnot. But the exposure to the music and the variety of the music, that was really important for me, because it kept me, because it's all about idiomatic interpretation, you know. So like creating the actual style, not just playing drum parts, but creating the style of the music. That was first and foremost. So I had to learn a lot about musical style, and I think that was important in keeping things fresh. And, you know, as we've kind of gone along, you know, doing a wide variety of music is important. The settings, that, you know, the brass theater project, which was 94, 5, and 6. I mean, that was incredible, because that was all done inside, indoors, on stages, in these halls where these great orchestras played in their summer, you know, their summer venues. And so these are stages designed for 5 percussionists with a full orchestra.
Yeah.
We'd go out there with 18 or 20 percussionists, and well, we had to learn how to reel it in very quickly. So, you know, but you know, it continued. It goes on and on. So now you introduce miking to the whole thing. So that changes what can happen. You introduce sound design. That's a whole other thing. And I think for me, in this last sort of venture at Crown, in the last maybe 4 years or so, it's become a much more collaborative process for me. You know, Travis Peterson, who I mentioned earlier, you know, we kind of share a lot of the battery writing stuff, and that has been really helpful, because the vocabulary out there it's constantly improving and getting crazier and crazier, and, you know, I'm not as in touch with that. So to have somebody like Travis and some of the other guys that are on the staff there, you know, infusing some thoughts and ideas, it keeps me learning, you know, it keeps me invigorated, and I'm still learning stuff. So maybe that's the answer. I'm still learning things. So that's how I'm keeping on going. But I'm also learning from other people that are close to me. So that's a very important part of it. So.
Yeah, I will always remember, I think a big learning moment for me was when we had you down, probably 8 years ago now. You came in and it was before I was the band director here, but I was working with the percussion ensemble. Mm-hmm. And so you came in, and we were able to get some funding to do clinics at a few different schools. And so we did some stuff with the chamber group at Centennial. And then we came out here to Urbana the year that we were doing the Heart Show by Brian Harmson. And we went through a rehearsal. I think it was kind of early, but the kids were drumming well. You had a lot of great feedback, and we spent like an hour kind of going back and forth and seeing things. And I'll never forget that at the end of that rehearsal, before we were leaving Urbana, you asked for a copy of the score to that show that Brian had written. And you said, there's just a couple interesting things that he does, and I'd just like to see it and learn from it. And I was like, all right, if Tom Hannum comes in and asks for a copy of music because he wants to keep learning from it, like I can never not do that. I've got to always want to ask for scores and see new music and learn from it. And so I remember, like you said, continuing to learn from it, seeing that was humbling for me, and just I thought a really cool thing. And so that sums it up.
It's a big part of it, you know. It's like you were talking about these marimba bands and stuff at UMass, and you know, the students and our alumni, they really do the arrangements. And I'm kind of I've sort of served as a producer, if you will. I don't really write the charts, but I kind of know, I think, how things can speak and work and whatever. So I try to guide that process. And but man, you learn a lot of stuff from the students and former students. It's pretty amazing because, you know, they're right there in touch with new ideas, and they're trying different things, and yeah, that's how you stay fresh.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah. We have another student question. This one, it could be easy, it could be hard, I don't know. But Hank in our trumpet section, who also played cymbals and indoor percussion, Hank wants to know what production was the most fun to work on of all the different productions you've done. Yeah, the most fun. Well, I will say this. I mean, the blast thing was a lot of fun. There's no doubt about it. It was happening at a very high level, but you know, who knows? Maybe I don't know whether there's any truth to this one or not, but it's not a competitive thing, right? So a lot of the drum corps experiences, I mean, obviously are, you know, they're you're in competitions, and that brings a different level of scrutiny. The blast thing, and honestly at UMass, it was the same way. I learned how to like do things and not have scores, I guess, numbers, outcomes be an important driving force of, oh, you know, this is a good year, this is not a good year, this is, you know, whatever. Yeah. So, but I think the blast thing was really, that was invigorating because it was near 2 hours of music. And again, the variety of what was going on in there was really a big range of musical styles. And, you know, for the people that may have seen a video or something of that, you know, the percussion, they were on stage, they were at the back of the stage in these squares, right? 6 squares that were 3 on the bottom and then 3 on top of them, elevated up over the ground. But you know, they didn't hear any of what was going on with the other percussionists, so they relied on in-ear monitors and visual camera monitors to see the conductor, all right, and then they could hear whatever was being fed into their earpiece. And so that was a real, and it was amazing how it kind of actually worked out pretty amazingly well. And I mean, I had no idea what to do with that, and everybody's like, well, how can we make this work? I mean, I don't know, let's just try it. Yeah. You know, so, and for better or for worse, I think I've been that way most of my career, and that is, there's a lot of things that we've done and things I've been around where I don't know the answers to them, but we need to do them. We need to try it. And, you know, drum lines didn't move around until we did it at Garfield. There was no pit until we did a pit at Garfield. Wow. You know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the people at 93 Star, it's like, well, you could never play that show because there's not enough notes. Well, we did. You know, we played it. There wasn't enough notes, but you heard every one of them. You know, and it was a different thing at that particular point in time. And, you know, that show itself is regarded as one that has, you know, it's certainly iconic in drum corps terms, and maybe changed the direction to some extent of what drum corps was doing. But you have to try things, you know, and you're not going to have the answers. And you and I were talking earlier today about the circumstance that we're in right now with, and here we are, everything's virtual, and
You're going to have your band this year virtual, and as we are at UMass, it's there's no meeting live, and so there's a lot of trial and error, and I don't know if what we're going to do is going to be successful. Yeah, I'm sure you don't. You have an inclination, you have a thought that yeah, maybe this will work, and so for the students that are out there, you got to realize, there will be trial, there will be error, there will be even failure. I mean, it's okay. That's how you learn about things. Is it's not always about getting it right. Doesn't hurt, right? Doesn't hurt to get it right even the first time, but for things where you're taking a chance, you're not always going to have the answers. And, your students and my students, they're going to have to trust us. That's a big part of the process. You have to trust the people that are in charge. And then you can devote your energies to making the plan come to life, making the plan get executed. There's always going to be plenty of time to sort of question or doubt, but there's really no place for it, I think, in what we're going to be faced with. There are enough challenges as there are, built into it. So, but I think that's a big part of it. I really do. So
that's awesome. That's really great. So I appreciate the insight, especially on the COVID thing. It's what we're all focused on, but I know a lot of us are also hoping for what comes next. And a couple students have submitted questions about auditioning for drum corps. We all want to march again. We're hoping it happens, maybe in the spring or the summer, fall, whatever. But for those that are looking at auditioning for a drum corps, what advice do you have as they're getting ready for that? And what do you think the instructional staff is looking for when they go through that audition process?
Yeah. Well, as you sort of alluded to, nobody really knows what's going to happen in terms of, say, 2021, and if it does happen, it's likely to be different than. I mean, actually, I'm just going to say it. It's going to be different, right? I mean, there's no way that it's going to be the same thing that we've all understood it to be to this point. There's just too many circumstances that have to be managed, too many issues that have to be overcome. And so, you put all that together, and I think what you're going to probably see is something that is a different product. Everybody has suffered some kind of financial strain from what we've experienced, and the drum corps are not exempt from that, and they're struggling, so you have to wonder, how many, do we need all the props? Probably not. Do we need a $125,000 sound system? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and if we do, there's going to be fewer groups that can. And I think the one thing we have to realize is we're going to need each other in order for the marching arts to continue on. We can't sort of go in our own direction, because it will quickly become the haves and have-nots, and there's probably enough of that struggle already, but it could really become so wildly disproportionate that we just don't give ourselves a chance. But so there's some of that. It will be different. I think it might take on some of the elements that you saw in Blast, some of the qualities that are in that type of a thing. It might be a smaller cast, if you will, for logistical reasons. How do you travel? Do you travel? Where do you stay? How do you? The fundamental questions are really, there's a number of important ones that have a lot of answers that need to be garnered. So But if I was, I think probably there's going to be a lot of remote virtual auditioning is my suspicion. And it probably, because you can't meet, you just can't get people to meet in the November cycle is it's too early. Is Urbana gonna allow the Carolina Crown to come in for a weekend and occupy their school? No, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so who is? And that's going on all over the country. So they're going to have to figure out different ways of doing this. I would say, if you're interested in drum corps, keep connected to the website of your favorite drum corps, the one that you want to audition for. That would be Carolina Crown, right? Of course. Come on, that's the one you want to audition for. Yeah. So obviously, but you audition. Keep in touch with the website for Crown and see what their plan is and when the plan is looking to get activated. And I'm sure some of it will be the same. There'll be, audition packets that you register and you pay for it and you download it and you prepare, but you'll probably submit video initially to kind of start this process. And then, where everybody's with their fingers crossed, and hopefully we can get to some point where we're able to meet in person. I think a lot of people, Mike, I'm sure you've been in numerous discussions where everybody's hoping that there's a vaccine, there's the miracle cure, so to speak. But, it takes time for those things to get worked into our way of doing things, having enough people feel like it's a good idea, and then finding out if it actually works, So there's still a lot that has to happen, but I think you're going to see it happen online. And, obviously drum corps want to be there in 2021, but, how we do it is, there's more questions for that than there is for how do you go back to school.
Yeah.
The reasons that you have answers to how do you go back to school is because school is upon us. So when drum corps gets upon us, that's when there will probably be more answers more answers. I wouldn't say more answers than questions, because there'll still be a lot of questions, but I think you'll see some things scaled back. It's inevitable. The financial part of it has been it is a struggle. So I don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, I think it was great. And it's interesting year to be auditioning, and so
yes, it is.
Understanding the situation is an important component, I think.
Yeah, I think for you guys that are out there, the students, you got to hang in there, man. You really do. This is obviously not easy, but you have to be dedicated. You have to commit to how it's going to be different, and you're going to be the people that are on the front side of helping to evolve this to a next place. And the next place might be temporary. We don't know, but you're going to be critical, because we need people who are passionate. We need people who are interested, and we need people who are dedicated to sticking with it. And, the one thing I would say is, when you do your auditions, don't go away. For some organizations that applies more than others, but don't be quick to go away. Stay with it. They might even tell you you're not invited to the next camp. Maybe you show up. I'm telling you, I'm serious. Awesome. Maybe you show up. You wouldn't be the first or last person that has done that, and it's worked out for them. And a lot of times they become the very best members, because they have a persistence. There's a persistence and a drive that's irreplaceable. And I've seen it time and time again. They're some of our best members. So don't go away. Don't go away. Keep going back.
One of our staff members got a spot on baritone at the Crossmen that way.
Yeah.
I think Gino asked her not to come back, and she said, well, what if I just keep showing up? And he was like, what? And she just went back and eventually got a spot, and she has done amazing things in the activity. And yeah, it's great.
It's rule number one about getting and keeping a job. Just show up.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you get a job. That's how you keep a job. Just show up and save the excuses for somebody else. Put the excuses to the side. Just keep going to work. And it's amazing. You know, there's a lot you learn from being in these kinds of circumstances, and being in drum corps it teaches you persistence. You know, you have to be able to navigate through those kind of challenging times of repetition and hot weather and long bus rides and lack of sleep, not eating what you want, cold showers, all that stuff. I mean, and eventually, guess what? None of it really matters. You learn that that's the small stuff. It doesn't really even matter.
Yeah.
Being around the people, and being affected, you know, by the energy of the organization is the big thing. That's what you'll remember.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I want to end with one fun question that came in kind of late from one of our students. Jordan, one of our tuba players, would like to know if you could bring back one aspect of drum corps from when you marched that's not around anymore, what would it be?
Oh, geez. Well, you know, things were wildly different then, man. They were wildly different. And you know, it might come back because this situation that we're faced with. I mean, when I was in drum corps, we practiced on Friday nights from like 7 to 9:30. And we would do that through like the fall. And then when it got to be January, we would have a Sunday, we'd have a long rehearsal. It would be like 1 to 5:30 or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like a long rehearsal. So you had Friday night, then you have Sunday afternoon. And, you know, it went on for a long time like that. And drum corps were, all the competitions, the performances were very regionally based. So there was a lot of groups, an awful lot of groups. And there wasn't this immense travel burden that people had to face. And, you know, you had to move in, and it's like a 2.5 month long process, you know, to putting a show together. And, you know, so it maybe it'll scale back to the point where there are some opportunities for people. And what it did is it let people of all ability levels in. There's a lot of corps, and they were just teaching you how to do stuff coming off the street. You didn't have to know how to read music, none of that. And it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if somehow out of all this, some more localized organizations could come into play and provide chances for kids that are, you know, they can't afford to do, you know, what it takes to be in an upper level drum corps. It's just an immense commitment of time, of money, of resources, and of travel. So maybe something like that could happen. I think it would be super cool if that would be the case.
I like that. I was hoping you were going to say marching timpani, but
well, then you got to get the crazy people to like carry them, you know.
Yeah.
And
not doing a lot of body.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Not covering a lot of the movement responsibilities with one of those on.
Yes. Right.
Man. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on. Any last words? Anything you want to plug? Audition for Crown. Go to UMass. Play Vic Firth, Sticks and Mallets. What else you got?
And the Beast. You got to use the Beast stick. I mean,
that's right.
That's right. The best stick out there. So that's the one that you use, and you're going to sound better. You're going to play faster. You're going to do all those things that you want to do. I really do think that it's, and we've kind of said it, but it's like you have to persevere, and I think that's something that you learn in band. I think it's something you learn in drum corps, because, and we were talking about this earlier, Mike. It's, we work on a limited amount of show material, whatever it is, 8, 10 minutes, whatever our number is, and you spend months doing it. So you're getting in there and you're getting in the weeds on a lot of details and things that maybe ordinarily you wouldn't expose yourself to. But I think when you do that, and everybody kind of is experiencing that kind of process and that effort inside the band, when things start to come together and you feel it, you can sense it, and then you get out and you perform and you're affecting yourself, you're affecting the people in the audience. It's a special thing, and the reward is a different kind of a reward, because it's the byproduct of people doing this. We keep all saying, we're all in this together. Guess what band is? You're all in it together. That's been happening ever since. So it's not a new saying, it's not a new slogan. It's indicative of what you get out of the band experience. And I think it's just really important you hang with it, you persevere. It's not always going to be right the first time. There will be failure. It's fun. It's okay. You got to be okay with that, and you'll learn from it. And then you pick yourself back up and you move forward. And that's what life is all about, So, yeah, those are my closing sort of thoughts. And I just think that, like, what you guys are doing at Urbana and the other programs, it's vital. It's vital that people stay with it. So don't go away.
Thanks, Tom. That's fantastic. We appreciate your time. It's great to hear from you and hear what you're up to. And we'll hope to do this again soon. Next time down here in Maryland, for real. Get some hard crabs and
there we go.
Drumming. All right.
There we go. You're talking my language, Mike.
All right.
Thanks for having me on. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I certainly did. So.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks.